Crazy Jerry in Michigan, him, says science in the Bible, for example, Jesus on the cross had water spill out of his chest area. All right, Crazy Jerry, you are on with Jimmy and Ben. What is going on? Oh, excuse me. All
Doctor.
right. Well,
Hey, Jimmy, Dr. Ben.
hey, what's going on?
Hey, not much. Yeah, I've been atheist probably since I was a little kid because I never really believed in anything. And, I always been told, you got to believe this, you got to believe that, And then in school, I was not really a science wizard because I can never remember anything. But when it comes to something, I'm like, oh, yeah, I remember this, I remember that. And, and I just lately I've been getting into the science of, religion, how, religion says, oh, we have the science, we have the facts, and all this. And somebody did the having Jesus into his ribs and the water came out. And I, used to hang around a friend of mine that, worked at the morgue. And I remember water coming out, and I remember asking him, what's that? He goes, oh yeah, water comes out after they've been dead. And when that was in the Bible, they had that in there. One of the shows I was watching about proving, this is how we know, there's science in the Bible, and they, this is the proof that, existence that, they knew stuff in the Bible about science. It kind of blew my mind, but I'm just kind of like, wondering, how do they know that back then? They know that, you know what I mean?
Well, it's not. I mean, okay, think about this for a second. Like, sure, you might not have known that water comes out of dead bodies when you stab them. But think about back then, they had people die all the time. We've had people dying since the beginning of humanity. And you don't need to be a scientist to know that when you stab a person after they've been dead for a while, that water might come out. Like they reasonably could be trying this because they've stabbed a lot of people since the beginning of humanity. So it's really not a scientific miracle or anything that they would know this to be true. They could know this from experience. Like there are lots of things that they didn't necessarily know how to explain back then, but they knew that it happened. It's like if you said that, well, the Bible's true because they knew that people bleed. Like, okay, but we know that people bleed. Like we've always known that. Like we know that people have eyes. Like we know that people have certain features. That's not really miraculous. And so even if now we understand more of the mechanism of why water might come out first, because we know it's related to gravity, and if you're not pumping blood, you have cells that kind of coagulate together and then will pool like at the bottom of whatever's facing like downward, and so you get this density difference and cell matter staying behind and stuff. But even if we didn't know that, we still would know that by experience these things are true. Right.
Yeah, go ahead. Crazy Jerry, what do you have to say to that?
Yeah, well, I kind of thought that, that our body, since it's made up of water, that would kind of happen. But my thing is like, well, you kind of said that, Dr. Ben, about, they would know that because they've had a lot of bodies, they've stabbed bodies before and, things like that. But wouldn't they basically just say, oh, he bled, but it was more of a,
well, no, because bleeding, because bleeding implies a red color. It implies sanguineous drainage, and we're talking about serous drainage, which is different. Like, because you don't always have blood, you have a lot of body fluids, and so if you separate out like the cell matter of blood versus like plasma, like plasma doesn't look to be blood. And so if they didn't know back then that there were more components to blood, they just saw this is a different color than this other matter, they probably wouldn't have said that it was bleeding, but they might have said water, because it does look like water. Like oftentimes maybe it's a bit more yellow, but they would probably more closely associate that to like dirty water versus blood. So I think the communication of that in the Bible isn't necessarily them making a scientific claim. It's them saying an observation of like, this is what we saw, and
Mm.
they could relate this to being water.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Jerry. So like Ben said, this doesn't seem to be all that scientific, right? People were probably experimenting on bodies for a long time just to kind of see what it was made up of, and what happened after life had ceased to be there. We know that the Greeks did this. They had this really, really incorrect kind of characterization of the body for a long time, called the humeruses, and the different components of the body that were later completely rebuffed and reclassified by more scientific means as our understanding got a little bit better. But when you called in, you used the term the science of religion, and so you haven't really kind of posited anything too scientific. So I'm kind of wondering what you meant by that term, the science of religion. Is there some kind of larger connection that you have, or some observation that you've made where you see some kind of scientific consistency across religion?
Well, it's just that, today, with, I don't want to use, I'm just doing with one of the people that I use is these creationist religion, how they're using, oh, well, we can prove science with creation. We can prove science with, things that happen, after creation. It's all in the Bible. Science is in the Bible. And now, I don't really believe that they had the knowledge that we have today, but they're showing it that, oh, yeah, we did. And I don't believe it that way. But then when they make up a pretty good claim, then I get confused. I mean, I have, I don't want to, to people, when you meet me, you don't think I have, a disability, but I do. And I know Jim Barrows has mentioned too that he has, he has attention deficit. I have that too, along with some other stuff. But I don't have, when I think about God, I don't like, okay, he's this, guy that's going to be watching me all the time, that he could strike me down for saying something and doing
hold on.
I might think
I want to just let's keep it on track, Jerry, for a second, if I may.
No, I am. I'm telling you how I feel. So when I hear these things, okay, I'm kind of like, okay, is this why I should believe in God? And then I'm like, but I don't believe in God. So I'm going back and forth. If you can prove something to me, is this going to change my mind to the way I should believe? But I don't.
No, this shouldn't. This shouldn't.
I don't believe in the things that are in the Bible.
Yeah, no, this shouldn't. This shouldn't change your mind.
And I was
before. Jerry, can you hear me? This should not change your mind, because not like simply a claim being true in the Bible is not the same as the thought process getting to truth being correct. So like if you were to roll some dice, like I could say, I think that this die is going to land on the number 5, and I can roll that die and it might be the number 5, and I might be right. Did I do anything special to predict that it was going to land on 5? No, it just happened to be that way. And I could get lucky and I could like roll the die a few more times and maybe they'll all be 5s. Like, is it less likely? Yeah, but it is still possible. It's not anything outside of reality. There's nothing like, except for maybe like, even if I said like the die was weighted to land on 5, that's still something that is within like natural reality. There's no supernatural force that stepped in to make it go to the number 5. And I still am not a psychic predicting this to happen. So I guess like a statement that you made that has me question is the fact that you had said that the Bible proves science. And that's kind of a backward way to look at this, right? So science is a method to evaluate truth. So we can't use the claim to prove the method that you're using. So that's just a little bit inconsistent, right? We should start with a question. So like, if you, I kind of even want to play a little game here with you. Let's take something in the Bible that you think is giving you a question. could you think of a question statement in your mind of what thing you're wanting to investigate?
Well, the thing is, you said that I said the Bible, has proved science. I don't really believe that, but I investigate that, and then it kind of makes sense to me. But then I kind of question the other things in the Bible.
But do you not prove? I don't think you're understanding that it's the statement. It's not whether or not the Bible actually proves science. I'm saying that is backwards. That's backwards way of thinking about it. Science is not something that you can prove because science isn't an ideology. Science isn't an actual fact. Like science is a method used to establish whether claims are true or not. So,
right,
like you can use science.
What I'm doing, but
right. So it's not. So it's a claim that's not going to prove.
I move on to something else.
No,
that proves credibility or
no. So you're not getting like science. You cannot use a claim to prove a method. Like, does that make sense to you? Like, you cannot use like Christianity cannot prove a method. Like, let me try to rephrase this. Like, can you prove philosophy is true? Does that make sense as a statement at all? No, because philosophy is a way that you think about things. So like philosophy isn't a claim in itself, but you use philosophy to get to like being convinced or not of certain things being true. That's kind of the same thing with science. Like philosophy and science are very similar in they're investigating truth, but they just do it from slightly different angles. And I mean, there's the whole conversation of science coming from a branch of philosophy. But it's odd. It would be odd for me to say like that Christianity proves philosophy. That's because that's just it's very weird. So can we flip the question to be, I don't know, maybe I'm confused about what you're trying to say here.
And I want to just kind of ask Jerry, because you had responded to Ben's initial remark and you said, I'm not really a believer, but then they make these really good points and I have to ask myself, or you have to reconsider. And Ben kind of gave you a breakdown of why they might have known what happens to the human body after it dies. So what are the other good points where you think that there is some kind of, I don't know, scientific basis for religion? I don't think you're getting anywhere with the idea of water coming out of the chest, but is there something else that maybe might cause you to rethink what a religion might say because it adheres to the scientific method?
Well, one of the things I'm suffering from now is dementia, so I can't remember a lot of them. But when I hear them, I'm kind of like, oh yeah. But then 2 or 3 days later, I kind of like start forgetting. But then I'm kind of like, I've been so long not, believing in God, so I go back to that kind of thinking. But then when I hear somebody say something, or I'm watching your show and I hear somebody make a comment about something, or talk about their beliefs, as I'm trying to keep myself in my I don't know if I just should say state of mind, or just my belief, or not even really belief, but I don't like using that word. I try not to use it, but it's so much around me with my family and friends that still have that concept of a God. I end up saying it, but it my conviction and of no God, it's hard not to hear things and see things about them talking about sciences and things like that, and things come up. But the reason why I really called in, because the thing about the water is because I kind of knew about that, but then I always hear things about, well, they didn't know these things back in the Bible. They did, and then I know this is going to be a real quick flip. I know I kind of do this, but I remember hearing the one time on the show about, Jesus talked about, oh, it's this and this and this, because he didn't know that if you washed your hands, you could get rid of these diseases. Do you understand what I'm kind of talking about? I think you do, Dr. Ben.
Yeah, but it's just odd. Like it's odd when people assume that people back then were just stupid, because that's not true. Like humans have been very, very intelligent. In fact, looking back at these civilizations back then, they figured a lot of things out on their own. And it's just the fact that they had different understanding of the way things work doesn't mean that they didn't end up doing the correct things, even if it was for a less good reason.
Jimmy's
like so,
on
so
that
if
thing
you
about
wash their hands,
but
like they didn't. No, Jared, like listen. So they didn't understand necessarily what germs were, but they could know reasonably that I was doing work and my hands got dirty. I was uncomfortable with my hands being dirty. If I keep my hands dirty and I touch other people, I see that people start getting sick. Like, they don't need to understand the germs necessarily, but they can at least make the connection of my hands were dirty and then I was uncomfortable and then bad things happened.
They thought it was demons. See, Jesus thought they were passing along demons.
No, not necessarily.
No. But also that's irrelevant. That's irrelevant because the action of washing their hands was whether or not what they thought the reason was behind washing their hands. They ended up seeing washing their hands as a way to prevent negative things from happening, and so they did that. They might have thought they were washing away the demons, and that's maybe not a correct reason to believe that washing your hands is a good idea, but regardless, they ended up washing their hands and it ended up having a better outcome. So it's not to say that like they knew everything about the situation, but they could at least draw enough connections to start making advances in their society and making advances in how they clean themselves. Like that's not something mind-blowing to me.
And Jerry, human history goes back a long way before we start to see the propagation of religion, the propagation of Christianity. We know that people didn't know why they would die from eating something. They just knew that they shouldn't because they would die. Even in a little bit closer to our own time, I mean, smallpox vaccinations, for example, back in the 1700s, people didn't really understand how they were able to kind of stop a disease from spreading by maybe creating a vaccine, or even that they were creating a vaccine to the level that we understand it today. But they just knew that, all right, from my observations, this is what I've seen. And so let's try and recreate and make those observations work. Let's reproduce them and see what the benefit could be. And sometimes there was a benefit, sometimes there wasn't. But we see things like this all throughout human history. And, this idea of, Jesus being speared after he was dead, whether you're talking about this or the Roman soldier kind of cutting into him, I kind of wanted to just get back to the intro that I gave when we talked about the similarities, where I talked about the similarities between different religions. We've seen this in other religions where, for example, in Norse mythology, Odin was speared after he was dead. And it's just an indication that these religions, not only do they build off of each other across time and space, but people in different regions are having kind of these same observations because people just do what people do. We try and learn about our circumstances and then we talk about them. And so whether or not the story of Jesus is kind of predicated on some other story that came before it, or it was something that simultaneously happened while other people were kind of experiencing the same phenomena with the human body, it's really irrelevant. We just know that it was happening and that we have evidence of it being in the Bible because, well, they knew it happened. You said, people in the Bible didn't know this, but you got it from the Bible. And we get these from other places that are stories that are centuries upon millennia old. And, we have this idea that people kind of knew at a very baseline level what was happening, especially with the human body. So I don't know. Any remarks on that? I don't know if we're getting anywhere anymore.
Well, yeah, I mean, you did. You hit on a lot of things. It's kind of like, it kind of helps me answer the questions when it's brought up to me and stuff. Is like, what can I say? And that's where I want to know. I mean, see, the more I hear the positive side of things, or how do I redirect? it helps me because I get lost and I don't know what to say. And then they make me like, oh, see, you, like I hear on your show a lot of times that people call in, oh, see, you guys do believe in God. You do believe. And I hate when people do that to me. And I know you guys just like it too. If I would like to say to Ben, you know, oh, I know you believe, Ben. I know you believe in God, you know, and you don't. You just like when people try to tell you, you know, what you're thinking. And I don't like people doing that to me either, trying to tell me what I think when they don't know what I think. That, you know, when I don't believe in God, but when they throw something at me, it's like throwing a dog a bone and say, look, that dog's going to go to that bone. But I don't want to go to it because I don't believe it anymore. But yet I kind of get trapped in it, and I'm like, I want to find out more. And then if I go that way, then they see like, look, see, you believe in God. You want to find out more. You want to find out more. Well, I'm finding out more so I can find out how I can redirect it so I can show them that they're wrong too. You know, that there is no
I
God.
think,
and show them
I think maybe you just need to take Jerry, I think you need to take a different approach to the discussion. And if you're not sure about where to go with it, you can always sit back and ask questions. Like that's one of the best ways to kind of understand how they're thinking about this. So that would be my recommendation is just if they make a claim, you can just turn it back around and say, how do you know that these are connected? Or how do you know that this is the cause of that? Like, for example, like if people say, well, the water coming from Jesus after he died is evidence that the Bible is true. You can ask them, how do you know these are connected? How do you know that the Bible being true is what means that this happened? Or even other ways around of looking at it. Like, because they made a connection in their brains. And I say this a lot. It's something I kind of call cognitive laziness. Or it's basically intuition, where you go from point A to point D and you don't really think about how you got there because your brain's making all these connections and you don't necessarily think about all of the steps that your brain is taking to get there. And so oftentimes people will make these connections, but really they're not actually connected. So trying to explore with questioning, asking like, how can I kind of tease out whether or not there's a relationship here might be the more helpful way to engage in that conversation. And I think Jimmy can agree with that too. But maybe instead of just like when a point is given to you, and instead of just jumping for it and going straight for, hey, this might be legitimate, like ask some questions first, think about how you can understand the thought process that they're coming from. And that's probably how I would handle this.
Yeah. Jerry, I'm going to give you a chance to wrap up, but I just want to say, you know, you can also do your own research. I think that's a great thing about the times that we live in today. Information is accessible. And when you hear something that doesn't make sense to you or makes you rethink, try and prove it wrong. You know, try and poke holes in your own theory. I know that as a military intelligence analyst, when I was doing that job, that I had to come up with assessments that I had to give to people that would use to make really important decisions. And I had to make sure that it was bulletproof, at least as bulletproof as I could. And even my own conclusions, I had to kind of poke holes through, right? I had to ask myself where I was wrong. And you can not only do that with your own thoughts, but with the things that people are telling you as well. If somebody is trying to tell you, well, here's what I believe, and it's a really good argument, and here's why, I concur with what Ben said. You know, you can ask questions, but you can also go find other sources outside of that person that's giving you this answer. So I think that's all I have to add on that. I really appreciate your call. This was a great discussion, and I hope we get to hear from you again. I'm going to give you the last word, and then we are going to move on, Jerry.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. And I usually try to do that, try to, you know, investigate things, but sometimes I get confused with things, and I'm glad you guys have these shows, and I will call in again. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Great. Yeah, that was good.